I never planned to stay the night, that was the first unexpected thing. I only went to drop off Liam's textbooks, because classes were starting and he'd left half of his notes back home. His father, William, opened the door when I knocked, and for a moment I just stood there, the sound of rain building behind me like a low drum. He wasn't what I remembered. Last time I'd seen him I was 17, shy, still half a boy. He looked older now, but in a way that made maturity seem almost warm. Gray threaded gently through his hair near the temples, but his eyes, calm, steady, deep, looked exactly the same. They were sharp enough to see through silence but soft enough to sit with it. He took the books, thanked me, then told me something I wasn't prepared for. Liam isn't home. He went back to campus early, didn't tell you? I felt foolish, stupidly disappointed. And soaked. The rain had already begun to soak through my hoodie. I stood under the basement light outside the doorway, unsure if I should leave or ask to wait for the rain. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His voice lowered, gentle but carrying weight. Come in. At least until the rain settles. You'll get sick out there. And just like that, with a gesture of his hand, I stepped into a house that felt too quiet, too large, and too lived in by only one person. The living room was dim, not dark, just muted. A single lamp glowed from the corner, casting warm gold on the furniture and highlighting the dust that swam lazily in the air. The smell was nostalgic. Wood polish, tea, rain-soaked earth from the open windows. I toed off my wet shoes, feeling awkward, like a guest who had arrived without invitation or purpose. He disappeared to the kitchen. I heard the kettle. The quiet clinking of cups. His soft footsteps. Something about the sound of another person moving around a house that big felt strange, like I could hear how empty it usually was. He came back holding 2 mugs. He offered me one without a word, and when our fingers brushed just briefly, something flickered, not loud, not obvious, but real enough that I felt it somewhere deeper than my skin. I looked at him then. Really looked. The way he held his cup with both hands like he was warming himself. The soft exhaustion around his eyes. The slight smile, barely there, like he wasn't used to smiling but remembered how because I was standing there. He sat across from me though the couch was long enough for 2. A careful choice, I thought. Our conversation was light at first, almost too careful. How's university going? Your parents doing well? You still drawing? Liam mentioned your sketchbook. I answered each question, feeling a strange comfort in his voice. Come, slow. Like he weighed every word before letting it fall. The rain grew harder, streaking down the window in silver streams. Without asking, he reached over and dimmed the lamp slightly, as if softer light made conversation easier, less revealing. It did. We talked about everything and nothing. How Liam and I met. How architecture classes had worn me down. How silence wasn't always lonely, sometimes it was peaceful. He nodded like he understood silence better than most. At one point he looked directly at me across the room, really looked, and the moment stretched, slow and delicate. His eyes didn't linger on my body, nothing inappropriate. But they lingered on me, like he wanted to learn the shape of my thoughts, not the shape beneath my clothes. I looked away first. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt like too much. When thunder rolled across the sky, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then shut off completely. Darkness. A heartbeat later, he lit a candle. The flame painted his face in gold and shadow, and I realized I had never seen him like this, quiet, unguarded, softened by warm light. He set the candle on the table between us and the space shrank. Not physically, emotionally. As if the dimness tucked us into the same small world. Outside, the rain hammered the street like racing footsteps. Inside it was just us, 2 voices, 2 breaths, 1 room. He exhaled slowly, leaning back into the couch. No electricity tonight, it seems. He smiled faintly. You might have to wait out the storm. I told him I could leave once it stopped. He only hummed in response, thoughtful, unreadable. Minutes passed. Comfortable. The kind where neither person needs to speak to feel present. Then he said something soft, almost to himself. It's strange having someone else in the house. I'd forgotten what that felt like. His voice was not sad, just honest. I swallowed gently. Do you want me to stay longer? I don't know why I asked. Maybe I needed to understand the look he gave me earlier. He didn't answer immediately. He just lifted his eyes to mine, slow, deliberate, unblinking. And that was when it happened. The moment that anchored itself in my chest like a held breath. The way he looked at me wasn't parental. Wasn't distant. Wasn't casual. It was gentle, curious, like he saw something he didn't expect, something he wasn't sure he should want. But he wanted to see it anyway. He spoke quietly. You can stay. Only if you want to. Thunder cracked outside. The candle flickered between us like a heartbeat. And there, in a house too big for one man, I realized the night wasn't accidental at all. Something had opened. Not fully. Not loudly. Just enough for warmth to slip through. I didn't know where it would lead. I only knew that when he looked at me like that, I didn't want to leave. And maybe he didn't want me to either. The storm didn't slow, if anything it worsened. Rain hammered the windows like 1,000 fingertips, and the wind moaned against the wooden frames of the house. I stood at the living room doorway, staring out into the wet blackness outside, knowing there was no chance I'd make it home without being soaked and miserable. Behind me I felt more than heard him move. "The guest room is ready," he said quietly. "You're welcome to use it if you'd like." His voice was thoughtful, not pressuring, not asking for anything in return. Just offering warmth in a place where warmth felt scarce. I nodded and he led me down the hall. The house felt older in the dark, like it held memories in the walls. Family pictures lined the corridor, some faded, some recent. Liam as a child with missing teeth, Liam as a teenager holding a trophy, and one photo of William with a woman who must have been his ex-wife. His hand rested on her back with such care it almost hurt to look at. He caught me staring. "It's been years," he murmured, tone unreadable. "But memories don't leave just because people do." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. Silence sometimes said the most. The guest room was small but warm. The bed neatly made, sheets crisp, a single lamp casting soft light against pale walls. I placed my backpack down and exhaled, feeling both at home and out of place, like I had stepped into a chapter one wasn't meant to read yet. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame as though debating whether to stay or go. "If you need anything," he paused, "my room is just down the hall." There was something fragile in the air, not romantic yet but too delicate to ignore. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded once, lingering a moment longer than necessary, then disappeared into the hallway. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. The storm grew louder, knocking against the world outside like someone wanting to get in. After a while, I heard footsteps, slow and distant. His footsteps, moving through the quiet like someone unable to sleep. Eventually, I rose, restless. The house wasn't my home, yet it pulled at me, or maybe it was him who did. The faint glow under the workshop door caught my eye. Curiosity guided me more than logic. I knocked gently. A moment passed and then his voice called me inside. He was hunched over a wooden frame, sleeves rolled, forearms strong and dusted with sawdust. The lamp above him cast a circle of amber light, leaving the rest of the workshop in shadow. He looked up, surprised yet not displeased. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head, stepping closer. He handed me a small towel for the dampness still in my hair. "Then, hold this for me," he said, placing one end of the wooden frame in my hands. His fingers brushed mine, a small touch, but something in it felt intentional, or maybe my heart just wanted it to be. We worked wordlessly for a while, like two pieces of a puzzle that finally touched edges. The only sounds were the scrape of wood, the patter of rain, and our quiet breathing. Then came the moment, innocent, simple but unnervingly intimate. He reached for the measuring tape, paused halfway, then turned to me. "Can you measure it for me?" he asked. "Just hold here, and pull it across." My heartbeat stuttered. It was nothing, just wood, just a tool, just distance. But when I leaned in, stretching the tape across the frame, our bodies drew close. Our shoulders touched, barely but undeniably. My fingers trembled as I marked the measurement, and he noticed. His hand steadied mine, warm, firm, gentle. Breath caught in my chest. Thunder rumbled, but inside the workshop it felt quiet, too quiet. His voice lowered as if acknowledging what neither of us could name. "You're shaking." I swallowed. "It's cold," I whispered, though that wasn't entirely true. He didn't argue. He didn't pull away either. Our hands stayed close, closer than needed. His touch was small but lasting, like a note held too long at the end of a song. He looked at me, and for a moment the space between us was a thread pulled tight, fragile and warm. I stepped back first, afraid of what staying might mean. He exhaled, slow. Not disappointed, just thoughtful. We cleaned up the tools in silence, but silence wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, with questions unasked and answers no one wanted to speak aloud. When we returned to the living room, the power was still out. The candle from earlier had burned low, flame flickering like a heartbeat running tired. He lit another, the glow brushing his face, softening the lines of age and responsibility. We sat together, closer this time, though there was space if either of us wanted it. Neither of us moved to widen it. The storm outside continued, a sound like restless dreams. Inside, the quiet stretched warm and fragile, like we were both balancing on the edge of something neither wanted to name yet. Our eyes met once. Just once. But in that look, everything unsaid pulsed loud as thunder. We looked away almost immediately, both pretending we didn't notice how close we had come to acknowledging more than help with measuring wood. Too close for nothing. Too careful to be something. Somewhere along the night, he stood and said softly, "Good night." But when he walked away, the warmth beside me stayed like an imprint. A touch that hadn't happened, a boundary nearly crossed. And I lay awake long after returning to my room, listening to the storm and his footsteps down the hall, wondering if he was awake thinking the same thing. Because the night had changed something. And neither of us could pretend it hadn't. Morning didn't arrive gently, it found me half awake, wrapped in sheets that still smelled faintly of wood dust and rain. My sleep had been thin, pulled apart by thoughts I couldn't name aloud. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hand steadying mine, felt the warmth of his palms spreading through me like a secret I didn't ask for but couldn't let go of. The house was quiet as though it too held its breath. When I stepped into the hallway, the air carried faint traces of brewed tea. I followed it to the kitchen, where sunlight slipped through half-open curtains, painting gold across the table. And there he was, not in a shirt and slacks like last night, but in a simple soft t-shirt and drawstring pants. He looked younger this way. Softer somehow. He didn't hear me at first. His back was to me, stirring something on the stove with slow, thoughtful movements. I could have stood there longer, watching the way the morning light touched his shoulders, but I made a sound, a small, unsure clearing of my throat. He turned. And he smiled, not wide but real. "Good morning." His voice was gentler than it had been last night, like sleep had brushed away some of his defenses. I murmured the same greeting back, stepping fully into the room. He poured tea into 2 cups without asking whether I wanted one, as though last night had made the gesture familiar. And that was when it struck me. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Like pages already written that we hadn't read aloud yet. We sat at the table, steam rising from our cups. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth sink into my fingers. He watched me, not obviously but quietly, like he was studying something fragile. After a long moment he spoke. "You worked well last night. With the frame." I laughed softly, more breath than sound. I was just trying not to drop anything. His smile curved slightly, eyes lowering to his cup. "You're steadier than you think." The compliment sat warm in my chest, heavier than it should have been. I didn't know how to answer, so I let silence speak for me. The clock ticked softly on the wall, the kind of sound no one notices until moments like this, when everything is too still, too delicate. I wanted to ask if he slept. If he lay awake like I did. If he thought about the closeness, shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, the way I did. But I said nothing. Because words felt too sharp for something so soft. He finished his tea before I did, pushing back from the table with a sigh that carried more history than fatigue. "Can I show you something?" he asked. His tone was careful, as though invitation itself was vulnerable. I nodded and he led me to a shelf in the living room. I had walked past it last night without noticing, but in daylight I saw frames of all sizes, unfinished woodwork, blueprints, sketches. Pieces of a life quietly made by hand. He picked up a small wooden box, carved with tiny patterns along the lid. When he opened it, I saw folded letters, dried flowers, things kept but not spoken about. One letter lay on top, edges worn, handwriting elegant and serious. He didn't hand it to me. He just looked at it, thumb brushing the paper like memory itself was a wound he still traced. "My wife and I, we tried," he said quietly. "In the end she wanted something else. Someone else." He didn't sound angry, just empty in places. I stood beside him, close enough to see the tremor in his fingers. Close enough to feel the weight of what wasn't being said. He closed the box gently and set it back on the shelf. "I don't talk about it much," he murmured. "Silence is easier than explaining." I swallowed, voice softer than breath. "Silence isn't always empty," I said. "Sometimes it's just waiting to be shared." He looked at me then, really looked, and I knew the words had landed somewhere deeper than casual conversation. The light caught in his eyes, reflecting something that felt like fragile gratitude. He stepped closer, not touching but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. Close enough that if I lifted my hand I could brush his sleeve. But I didn't. Neither of us moved. Because movement might break something we didn't want to lose. His voice came lower, almost a whisper. "You make this house feel less quiet." The room felt suddenly too small, not because the space had shrunk but because my chest had filled with something I couldn't name. I exhaled shakily, heart steady but loud. "You make silence feel safe," I answered. We didn't look away. Not this time. Seconds stretched like soft thread, delicate, precious. His gaze didn't demand anything, but it offered something. Something warm. Something that asked to be trusted. And that was when I realized. Neither of us was pretending anymore. We weren't just waiting out a storm. We were standing inside one, quietly, willingly. The rest of the morning passed slow and tender. He chopped wood for the fireplace. I sat nearby, sketching the way the light framed his profile. We didn't speak often, but when we did, our voices were gentle. Sometimes our hands brushed passing tools or cups, and neither of us pulled away too quickly. Something had changed. Not visibly. Not loudly. But enough that every silence now had meaning, like unfinished sentences we were both afraid and eager to complete. By afternoon, the power returned with a hum, but neither of us moved to turn on the lights. We kept the house dim, warm, filled with soft air that didn't need bright clarity. Because the quiet felt like a shared secret now. And secrets, once shared in the right company, don't feel heavy. They feel like belonging. When evening came, we found ourselves sitting on the couch, closer than any casual distance should allow, though neither acknowledged it. His arm rested along the back of the couch, near my shoulders but not touching. My knee angled slightly toward his. Too subtle to call intimacy. Too deliberate to call coincidence. The television was on, but neither of us watched. Silence settled between us like a blanket, gentle, steady, comforting. Something unspoken was growing. And we both felt it. The night deepened, but neither of us rose to leave. We sat in the dim light of a quiet house that suddenly didn't feel empty. We didn't speak. We didn't move closer. We just existed, side by side, breath and presence, silence and warmth. And strangely, beautifully, that was enough. At least for now. By the third evening, the house no longer felt like someone else's home. It felt like a place I belonged, even if I didn't yet understand why. We had fallen into a rhythm without planning it. Morning tea. Quiet conversation. Small tasks in the workshop. Evenings beside the fireplace, where words felt unnecessary because the silence between us had stopped feeling empty. It felt shared, like we were holding it together. But that night something shifted. Not in a loud way. Not dramatic. Just enough that afterward even the smallest touch carried weight. He was fixing the loose hinge on a cabinet door, kneeling on the floor while I held the flashlight over him. The room smelled of sawdust and varnish, with the faint crackle of rain returning outside. He leaned into the cabinet to tighten a screw, and I unconsciously leaned closer to see. Too close. Our heads nearly touched. My breath stirred the hair near his ear. He froze. Not completely, just enough that I felt it. His hand paused on the screwdriver, the faint sound of metal against wood going still. I didn't move either. The air became thick, heavy, charged with a question neither of us had been brave enough to ask. For a moment time didn't move. He exhaled first, a slow, steady breath that brushed my cheek like warm wind. He shifted slightly, turning his head, and suddenly we were facing each other in the narrow space beneath the cabinet door. Not fully, but close enough that I could see the details in his eyes. The tiredness, the kindness, the flicker of something he kept carefully contained. Too close to pretend we hadn't felt it. I pulled back slowly, trying to be casual. My heel slipped on the smooth tile. Not dramatically, just enough to send me off balance. His hand shot out instinctively. One strong, steadying grip around my arm. Just a touch. A simple gesture. Yet my pulse spiked like lightning behind my ribs. His thumb brushed the inside of my arm, not intentionally seductive but impossibly gentle. He didn't let go right away. His fingers remained warm against my skin, holding me in place as though something fragile might break if he released too soon. Our eyes met, an unplanned collision. There was no hunger there. No bold claim. Only vulnerability, deep and unguarded, and it was somehow more intimate than any scripted desire could have been. He spoke my name then softly. Almost like he needed to make sure I was really there. "You okay?" His voice was a low hum, warm enough to melt every question I'd been trying to bury. I nodded, though the world felt unsteady in a different way. He let go, slowly, carefully, like his fingers didn't want to break contact even as they did. But his hand didn't fall to his side. Instead, it moved up, hesitation visible in the motion, resting briefly on my shoulder. Just a hand. Just weight. Just warmth. Yet it felt like something irreversible. My breath caught. His did too. I heard it, soft and betraying. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. It would have been easy to step back, to turn away, to laugh off the moment like clumsy coincidence. But neither of us did. His hand stayed, steady, gentle, present, as if silence itself was asking us not to run. Seconds stretched. More than seconds, meaning. Eventually he did pull away. Not abruptly, like someone easing out of a dream they're not ready to leave. He cleared his throat, standing up. I rose too, slower, unsure where to put my hands, unsure why my body still tingled where he'd touched me. He didn't look at me right away. He busied himself with the tools, wiping them clean, placing them carefully into drawers. But his movements were too precise, too careful, like the effort to appear composed was work. I waited. Not because I expected something more, but because walking away felt impossible. When he finally spoke, his back was to me. "I'm afraid I held your arm too tightly," he murmured. "I shouldn't have startled you." I swallowed. He misunderstood. Or maybe he was protecting the moment by pretending it was nothing. "It didn't hurt," I said quietly. Then softer, more honest. "I didn't mind." That made him pause. Just a half second, but I felt it like a tremor. He set the cloth down slowly and turned to face me. His expression wasn't remotely casual. His eyes held a softness I hadn't seen so openly before, like a door left ajar. "Good," he said, barely more than a breath. We didn't step closer. We didn't touch again. But something had already changed. That night, I sat beside him on the couch again. The space between us smaller than before, close enough that when I shifted, my knee brushed his. He didn't move away. Neither did I. We watched the fire instead of the TV. Flames rose and fell like quiet breath. He rested his hand on the back of the couch again, just behind my shoulder, and though his fingers didn't touch me, their nearness felt intentional. A presence. An invitation without words. The silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was acknowledgement. Something was forming, slowly, fearfully, but undeniably. Not a romance yet. Not a confession. Just two lives leaning slightly toward each other. I went to the guest room later, but I lingered at the doorway before closing it, half hoping he'd say something, half scared he would. He looked up from the couch, meeting my eyes across the hallway distance. A quiet moment. A shared understanding. He didn't call me back. I didn't ask him to. But when I lay down, his touch still lived warm against my arm. Not as memory but as presence. A touch that stayed long after it ended. A touch I didn't want to forget. The days that followed felt like walking a thin wire, suspended between what we were and what neither of us dared to name. Nothing dramatic happened. No bold confessions. No declarations. Instead, it was the quiet things that kept unraveling me, the way he said my name so gently, the way our hands brushed when passing a mug, the way silence wrapped around us like something warm. Every morning began with tea. Every evening ended with the two of us in the living room, a shared world held together by low conversation and longer pauses. And every day the distance between us seemed to shrink, not visibly but internally, like two tides inching toward each other without realizing how close the waves had come. One afternoon we sat on the back porch. The storm had passed, leaving the world fresh, leaves glittering with leftover rain, the air damp and sweet. He leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, soaking sunlight like someone who had forgotten its warmth. I watched him. Not deliberately, just unable not to. There was something about him in moments like this, when he let his guard down without knowing, that drew me in. The softness in his jaw when he relaxed. The slow rise and fall of his chest. How his hands, strong, capable, rested loosely on the armrests as if holding nothing for once. He must have felt my gaze because he opened his eyes and turned toward me. I looked away, too late, too obvious. He noticed. "You're quiet today," he said gently. I shrugged, trying for casual. "Just thinking." His lips curved, that faint, thoughtful smile he'd been giving me more often lately, like he saw through me and didn't mind. "About what?" he asked. I hesitated, a long, trembling pause. "Everything." This impossible closeness that felt too gentle to be wrong and too unspoken to be safe. But I didn't know how to say any of that. So instead, I told the truth that felt small enough to hold. "About how comfortable this is," I murmured. He didn't move, didn't react with surprise. He just breathed in slowly, the way someone does right before they step into cold water. "I've gotten used to you being here," he admitted. More than I expected to. The words landed between us like something delicate, fragile and alive. My chest tightened. He turned his chair slightly, facing me more directly now, his eyes steady and sincere. His voice dropped lower, almost uncertain. "It's been years since I've let someone into my space like this? I held his gaze. His vulnerability wasn't loud, it was soft. And something soft is so much harder to ignore. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, speaking quietly. You don't have to explain, I said. I feel it too. The air shifted, warm, charged, careful. He looked down at his hands, then back at me, slower this time, like the world had narrowed to just our eyes. What do you feel? He asked. Not challenging. Not pushing. Just wanting to know, like the answer mattered. My heartbeat stuttered. Everything inside me trembled, not with fear but with possibility. I stood, not to leave but to lessen the space between us. I moved to sit on the porch step instead, closer to where he was. The distance now was only an arm's length, a choice, not an accident. His breath hitched, barely audible but real. I stared at the grass for a moment, afraid to drown in his eyes if I looked too long. I don't know what this is, I said slowly. But it doesn't feel like nothing. Silence, stunned, soft, open. He didn't speak right away. But when he did, his voice was barely more than a whisper. No, he breathed. It doesn't feel like nothing. He shifted only a few centimeters, but closer. The kind of closeness that wasn't accidental anymore. The kind that invited without asking for more. Our shoulders nearly touched. Not quite, but almost. The almost was louder than any contact. He exhaled shakily, a sound not of regret but recognition. I don't want to misread you, he murmured. You're young. And I'm. Don't, I interrupted, gentle but sure. He blinked, surprised. I turned to him fully now, heart steady despite trembling hands. His face was inches from mine, sunlight catching the edge of his jaw. I could see the uncertainty there, the warning he wanted to give before either of us stepped too far. But I also saw something else. Hope. Quiet, careful hope. I know the difference between confusion and comfort, I said softly. And being here, with you, feels right. His eyes closed for a second, like he was absorbing the words before trusting them. When he looked at me again, everything inside them was unguarded. He didn't touch me. He didn't pull me into him. He wasn't reckless. He simply lifted one hand, slowly, giving me every chance to step back. And when his fingers brushed my forearm, it was barely contact at all. But it meant everything. Warm. Tentative. Real. His thumb traced a small line along my skin, innocent, careful, trembling slightly. And I didn't move away. I didn't breathe too fast. I just let the touch exist, a question neither of us needed to answer yet. I placed my hand over his, gently, deliberately. His breathing stopped for half a heartbeat. Not passion. Not urgency. Just two people admitting something neither could deny anymore. Something unspoken becoming undeniable. He looked at our hands, then at me, and in his eyes I saw relief. Fear. What? Gratitude. All tangled in a quiet kind of honesty. What if this is real? He whispered. I smiled, small, shaky, certain. Then we don't have to run from it. His fingers curled around mine, slow, like a confession without words. And for the first time, it didn't feel like we were standing at the edge of something uncertain. It felt like we were beginning. We didn't rush anything, not that day, not the next. What changed wasn't visible, but it was felt. Like a door inside both of us had quietly unlocked. And neither of us pretended we didn't hear it click open. We went back inside after the porch. No dramatic moment, no kiss, nothing movie-like. Just two people who suddenly knew the ground beneath them wasn't the same, and maybe it never had been. His hand brushed mine when he passed me a glass of water, and instead of pulling away, he let it linger. I didn't hide the way I lingered back. Tiny things. Small openings. But they were enough to shift the entire landscape between us. That night we ended up on the couch again, our unofficial ritual. Except now there was a new awareness in the room. Not tense, not awkward. Just present. Like a warm light shining softly on something we had pretended was in shadow. He sat beside me, closer than usual. My knee touched his. Neither of us moved. He pretended to scroll on his phone. I pretended to read. We were both terrible actors. Eventually he set his phone down, exhaled, and spoke without looking at me. I didn't expect this, he said quietly. I closed my book even though I hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. What part? I asked. He thought for a moment. His voice came out low, thoughtful, almost bewildered. The way you fit into my life without asking for space. I felt that. Deeply. Most people barged in, demanded attention, wanted to be noticed. I never wanted to force anything with him. Maybe that's why it grew naturally, like vines finding sunlight. I rested my head back against the couch, eyes drifting to the ceiling. "I didn't mean to take space," I murmured. "I just like being here. With you." He turned his head toward me, slow, deliberate. "I know." And something softened between us, something that had been tight with uncertainty finally loosened. He shifted, one arm resting along the back of the couch, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from him. It would have been easy to lean into him, reckless maybe, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I looked at him the way I had in the beginning, with caution and curiosity and just a little fear. Except now he didn't look away. He held my gaze like he wanted to memorize the moment. "You changed my routine," he said. His voice wasn't complaining, it was almost wondering. "How?" I whispered. He smiled, not wide but real. The kind of smile people wear when they admit something that's been living quietly in them for a long time. "I used to spend my evenings in silence because it was easy. Now I spend them in silence with you because it feels right." My stomach tightened, not with nerves but with something warm, spreading like morning light. Silence was our language long before words caught up. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I let the weight of his words settle into me, anchoring themselves somewhere deep. After a while, I shifted, not bold, just honest, and let my shoulder rest lightly against his arm. His breath caught for half a second, then steadied, slower, calmer. He adjusted too, almost imperceptibly, enough that the small contact became intentional. I think that was the moment everything became real. Not when we held hands. Not when we admitted it wasn't nothing. Here. In the quiet. In the ease of leaning into each other like it was the most natural thing in the world. Later, when the room had grown darker and neither of us moved to turn on a lamp, he spoke again, voice soft, like a confession made under dim light feels safer. "You make me feel like I'm not alone." My chest tightened, breath stalling for a heartbeat. Not because I didn't know, but because hearing him say it out loud was like touching something sacred. I turned slightly, head tilting so I could see him better, even in the low half-dark. "You're not," I said quietly. And then, after a pause because it felt true enough to say aloud. Maybe I needed someone too, more than I realized. He exhaled, a slow release like something heavy had finally been set down. "I didn't know I was waiting," he murmured. The words washed over me, gentle, aching, whole. And it struck me then, all those quiet nights, all the unspoken glances, all the almost touches, maybe neither of us had been drifting aimlessly through those moments. Maybe we'd been moving toward this without knowing. Toward each other. He shifted, turning fully toward me, leg brushing mine with intention this time, not accident. His fingers found the back of my hand, tracing thoughtful lines across knuckles and skin. Slow. Careful. Like he was learning a new language by touch alone. I curled my fingers between his, weaving them like something that belonged. He didn't pull away. For a long time we just sat like that, not moving, barely speaking, breathing in sync. His thumb brushed my skin in slow, tender arcs, like he was grounding himself. Or maybe grounding me. The house around us was silent, but nothing about the moment felt empty. It felt full, heavy with meaning, with what comes next, with a kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing until I felt it. We didn't kiss. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. We existed in the same breath, in the same space, with the kind of closeness that didn't demand more to feel real. Not everything begins with fireworks. Some beginnings are quiet, soft enough to hold gently, strong enough to change everything. When I finally looked up at him, he was already watching me, not startled, not avoiding, just there. Present. Open. Waiting without asking. And I realized, maybe I'd been waiting too. Without knowing. Without searching. Waiting for someone who could sit beside me in silence and make it feel like connection instead of absence. Waiting for a hand that didn't grab, just reached. For a heart that didn't demand, just offered. Waiting for him. And somehow, quietly, inevitably, he had been waiting for me too. Morning came softly. Not dramatic, not jarring. Just light, slowly unfolding across the room like warm paint on canvas. I woke before the house fully stirred, before birds began wrestling with the idea of song. The guest room ceiling looked unfamiliar in the pale dawn, but my chest felt strangely settled, like something in me had finally exhaled after weeks of holding air. I dressed quietly and stepped into the hallway, expecting to find the house asleep. But he was already awake. He sat at the kitchen table in an old sweatshirt, one hand wrapped around a steaming mug. His eyes were half tired, half soft, like someone who slept but not deeply, as if something had kept him aware I was here, and that awareness wasn't discomfort but comfort. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. Not surprised, almost like he'd been waiting. "Morning," I said, voice low and used. He gestured to the seat beside him, not commanding, just offering space. A silent sit with me. I did. The warmth from the mug seeped into my palms when he handed it over. Not his drink, a fresh one he'd made. The gesture wasn't grand, wasn't loud, but it carried weight. He thought of me before I entered the room. We sat that way for a while, two quiet shapes in morning light, not needing to fill silence with words. He glanced at me now and then, and every time he did, I felt something ripple through the air like a thread drawing us closer. Not possession. Not urgency. Just presence, gentle, patient, sure. After breakfast, we went to the yard, moving like two people who had learned the rhythm of one another without asking. He watered plants while I collected tools we'd left out from the day before. It felt like routine, and yet completely new. When I brought him the wrench, his fingers brushed mine. A small touch, barely there. But we both felt it. His eyes met mine, and in them was the same quiet understanding as the night before. We weren't imagining this. We weren't lost in confusion anymore. We were in it, even if neither of us knew where it would lead. He wiped his hands on his jeans, hesitated, then spoke carefully, like unwrapping glass. You'll go back home soon. Not a question. Not quite a statement of acceptance either. Just truth, soft and uncertain. I nodded, throat tight. The reality we'd ignored was standing with us in the sunlight now. Yes, I answered. He looked away, jaw tightening just slightly. It wasn't anger, it was something quieter, like the heart bracing for distance before it even arrived. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough that if either of us leaned even an inch, we would. I don't want to, I admitted. His eyes lifted to mine, slow and questioning, like he didn't expect permission to hope. You don't? No, I whispered. Not after this. Not after us. He let out a breath, shaky, controlled, and for a moment I saw every wall he'd built start to shift. His voice came low, rough with emotion he rarely let out. I don't want you to go either. The sentence hung in the quiet morning like a fragile ornament. We stood there, facing each other, both pretending not to tremble. I didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for me. But the space between us felt warm enough to hold. We sat on the porch again as the sun climbed higher. He rested his arm on the railing and I sat close, not touching, but close enough that the warmth of his body reached me like a slow tide. He turned his head toward me, eyes steady. I don't know what happens next. Neither did I. But uncertainty didn't scare me the way it once would have. I smiled, small, honest. We don't have to know, I said. We can just let it be what it is. His shoulders softened, a little release of tension, like the idea itself was a relief. He looked at me with more softness than I'd ever seen, not youthful infatuation, not reckless desire. Something deeper. Something with roots. Whatever this becomes. He said slowly, I want to meet it with you. The words didn't hit me like fireworks, they settled like gravity, like truth finding its place. I leaned toward him, finally closing the inches we'd been careful with for so long, and rested my head gently on his shoulder. He didn't move at first, maybe afraid to break the moment. Then he shifted, subtle, sure, letting his cheek rest lightly against my hair. We breathed together. Not perfectly in sync, but close enough that the differences made harmony instead of tension. His hand lifted, hesitated, then settled over mine. Not gripping. Not pulling. Just holding. A touch that didn't ask for more. A touch that said I'm here. And for the first time I understood the depth of it. He wasn't offering certainty. He wasn't promising forever. He was choosing now. And somehow that felt bigger than anything else. We spent the rest of the day as if time belonged to us. Slow conversations, quiet laughter, moments of closeness that asked for nothing more than existence. At sunset, we sat outside with tea, watching the sky melt into soft colors. No claims. No labels. No urgency to define what we were. Just two people who found something gentle and real in the stillness of one another. When night came and the house quieted again, I lay in the guest bed with the window slightly open, letting the breeze move through the room. I stared at the ceiling, not with confusion but with calm. Maybe love didn't always announce itself with chaos. Maybe sometimes it arrived like slow dawn, the kind you don't notice until you realize the room is full of light. I thought of him in the next room, his breathing, his warmth, his presence. Not distant. Not unreachable. Just there. Near enough that I could feel him in the quiet. And as sleep finally pulled me under, I carried one thought with me, soft and sure and full. I didn't expect him. He didn't expect me. But I wouldn't undo a single moment. Whatever this becomes. Friendship, love, something unnamed and unfolding. It began softly, honestly, without force. And I was no longer afraid of the way it grew.